Hey there, I am Barb Higgins, and this is 1,000 Tiny Steps. In this podcast, I share my stories of love, loss, triumph, and tragedy as I continue to retrace my steps and ponder what led to the death of my daughter Molly. By doing so, I hope to not only help myself, but to bring purpose and possibility to those who listen. If you are ready to laugh, cry, shake your head in disbelief, then tie, buckle, face up, or slip on your shoes and join me as we begin our 1,000 Tiny Steps. Hey everybody, Barb Higgins here, welcoming you to episode 137 of 1,000 Tiny Steps. So as I sit here in my well-shared favorite podcast room, which is my bedroom, I have two guests with me today. What makes these girls important to me is that both of them met Molly when they were 5. Jane and Molly met at CDA when Molly and Gracie joined the competitive dance team. And Jane and Molly were together all the time. Jane carried Molly all around because Molly was teeny tiny. At about the same time, Molly started kindergarten at Kimball School. And her first ever best friend, I found this out by a crayon written letter in my mailbox, was Skylar Howard. And Skylar also danced at CDA for a long time. Both Jane and Skylar are diagnosed with epilepsy. Epilepsy is invisible. Today, as we record this, it's March 26th, which is Epilepsy Awareness Day. So although you won't hear this for a few weeks, by the time you hear it, we're well into April. It's not lost on me that we're recording this on this particular day. So Jane, I'm going to start with you.
I'm Jane Siegel, and I had my first ever seizure when I was 6 months old. And my mom looked back. She was driving. My mom looked back. My eyes rolled back. And she was very confused. She didn't have a phone with her at all. She stopped the car, pulled over, and stopped somebody to pull over. And no one was stopping. And finally, somebody did. They saved my life. And I was post-ictal for an hour, which means unresponsive. Usually people are only post-ictal for like 10, 20 minutes. I was post-ictal for an hour. Now, I was never tested. And I have actually the most common type of epilepsy, which is temporal lobe epilepsy. So I do not convulse. I get really bad heartburn, and my eyes will roll back in my head. I'll randomly stare off at things, and random words will come out of my mouth. Usually I swear a lot. I can't help it. Sometimes I twitch, but I don't usually convulse, only if I'm standing up, but I'm lucky enough that I can tell when a seizure is about to happen. I will hallucinate. It's very scary. And when I was in school, no one believed me. When I had to quit dance when I was 15.
I remember that.
Finally diagnosed me when I was 15. But I just remember everyone didn't believe me. Nurses at school didn't believe me. In the ER, they did not believe me. People thought I was faking. And then finally at 15, I had a seizure at dance. I felt really sick. So I sat down. My eyes rolled back in my head and I started drooling, and I just started screaming at everybody for no reason, just shrieking. And I woke up in an ambulance. I was so confused. And finally, I got sent to a bigger hospital, and they were like, we don't think it's this. And they tested me. I had 15 seizures in my sleep. They're like, it's epilepsy. Because you just think of the convulsions. It's not all convulsions. That's actually the rarest type of seizure. I didn't even know that. And I have epilepsy now. I've learned so much. And it's the 4th most common neurological disorder.
That blows my mind, because I'm sitting here listening to the 3 minutes you've been talking, and I think I've learned 4 new things. And, and I've been trying to read up and be prepared for us having a conversation. My first memory, I would say, of you when I was coaching cross country there, and you had quite a severe seizure.
Broke the water fountain with my head.
Yeah. Skylar, you've broken things too. And I remember the girls in the cross country team, some of them were super concerned and didn't really know. A handful of them said, oh, that's Jane. And I said, well, that sounds dismissive, because my first thought was a seizure, because you were having some twitching and some weird body movements. And I remember coming home and asking Gracie about it. And Gracie didn't know anything. I don't know. And then finding out, I think just through maybe some folks at CDA and some dance moms, that you were diagnosed with epilepsy. And I remember my heart just sank. So you have a seizure when you're 6 months. You're not diagnosed until you're 15. So my first question is, what the fuck? Like, so would you have what we know now as seizures that we don't think of as, convulsive seizures?
They're called focal seizures. There's so many different types of seizures.
Right.
You can actually have seizures without having epilepsy. It's called seizure disorder.
Yes.
That's why when you told me Molly, when she had the tumor, when she would kind of zone out a little bit, that's why I was like, maybe those could be focal seizures that she was.
They actually had evidence in her brain of seizures and of a couple of strokes that last few days before she died. So she had a lot going on up there. And again, she was disbelieved. You're being dramatic. Temporal lobe epilepsy, is that what you have? Yeah. Okay.
There's different lobes in your brain. There's the front lobe, the temporal lobe, and like mine's where the memories are, which is why my memory is terrible. I have really bad short-term memory loss. And so
which is just going to add to people's judgment of you, right?
Fun fact, only 3 to 5% of people with epilepsy are affected by strobe lights. Everyone thinks that people with epilepsy are affected. No. And I actually, fun fact, sounds affect me more than lights. Loud noises, dubstep, but that's only when I'm in the middle of zoning out.
Yeah.
That's why I'll always shush people. Like, I'll be like, hold on a second. If there's people talking around me while that's happening, I'm going to have a seizure.
Right. Got it. Fun fact, I did not know that until right now. All right, Skylar, I'm going to go to you now. Your story is a bit different. I'm going to let you tell it.
So I'm Skylar Howard. I'm 20. I grew up in Concord, obviously, or else I wouldn't have met Molly. My story is like the biggest roller coaster ever. So my whole life, just up until I got diagnosed, totally normal, healthy kid, no neurological problems. And then in 8th grade, I started getting migraines. So that was when I had my first MRI. Nothing was found, nothing at all. And then quarantine hit. 2020, everyone was inside their homes. And so I would hang out with Mia Appichel. I had my first seizure going to work. At the time, I was working at Hannaford's and I didn't have a license. So she had stayed the night at my house and she was willing to take me to work. And it was 6:40. I remember because I looked at the time in her car and I said, hey, like I have 20 minutes. Do you want to just like chill and hang out before I go in? And she was like, yeah. Next thing I know, I am in an ambulance driving away. I could see Mia's car out the little windows and I'm like, what the hell is going on? Apparently from my mom, she had showed up to the house, absolutely frightened, and then she told my mom, Skylar just had a seizure. I did not know what the hell was going on. I always tell people this after I have a seizure. I'm like a blackout drunk best friend. I slur my speech. I can barely make a sentence. Like, I don't know what the hell's going on.
What do you look like having a seizure? Is it obvious that you're having one?
Yes. So I do convulse. I have myoclonic epilepsy. So all my seizures are grand mal.
Grand mal seizure is really the most severe seizure you can have. There are petit mal seizures, and then there are seizures like Jane describes that outwardly you might notice somebody zoning out, but that's all you really see. There might not be a lot of physical movement with it. So a grand mal seizure, you would have convulsing. You could have like saliva and fluid in your mouth, eyes rolling back, all of those things.
Yeah, so I had that first seizure. And then next thing, like next week or something like that, Mia and I went to Hampton Beach to see the sunrise. And then we were like, yeah, we're going to spend the day at the beach. And here I am knee deep in the water. When I have a seizure, I fall. Doesn't matter if I'm sitting or standing, I'll fall back. And I almost drowned. Mia, love her. She pulled me out of the water and I went to the ER. And then my mom was like, well, what the hell's going on? We go to our neurologist in Dartmouth Hitchcock. I got wires all attached to my head, then got like a wrap around my head. And the guy was like, all right, we're going to have these on you overnight. And then you're going to come back tomorrow morning to get them taken off. We get there. This is 4 days after my birthday, my 17th birthday. And they take them off and they go, okay, we're going to go in this separate room. And they said, you have epilepsy. You were showing a lot of seizure activity in your head while you were asleep, and you have myoclonic epilepsy. Well, at the time it was juvenile myoclonic epilepsy because I was still 17, but I have severe depression, and I think that just adds to the list. Growing up, I had a rough, like my mom's home, perfect. The other one, no. So I was still dealing with that. Like, I just couldn't process that. And then the epilepsy, I'm like, I don't have a normal life anymore. It was just a process of elimination. It still is. They're still trying to get me to be seizure free. I was a year seizure free at one point, my senior year. And then one day I woke up, major migraine, and you can piss yourself when you have a seizure. And so I woke up to that. I'm like, fuck. Like, I felt so defeated. But one of my main bad epilepsy stories, as you know, Barb, I had a really bad grand mal seizure when I had gotten home the night of prom, and I had a seizure. I knocked my head into my bed frame, and I woke up obviously naked because it was after a shower. And my mom was like, you need to get up right now. And I got pneumonia. I had barely any oxygen going to my head. I got put in the resuscitation room. All these scans and everything. I don't even remember. All I really remember was telling them what arm to put the IV in. They eventually transferred me to Dartmouth in Lebanon. I wish the nurses could get a fucking raise because they made posters and streamers and everything saying, congratulations, Skylar, because I graduated.
Listeners, when this happened to Skylar, it was 2 days before high school graduation. We were just praying and praying and praying, even with the hospital let her out for 2 hours to go to graduation and go back. And of course, she was far too sick, ingesting blood into her lungs. I'm on the school board, and so I was at graduation. So once they knew she couldn't come and why, I pulled her diploma so we could get it to, well, they gave it to you. But this is just such a classic example of the things you miss, right? Having these Jane, you have a lifetime of these things missed because of an illness that's unpredictable and insidious and all of that.
I've had so many concussions too from that. Like
Yeah, you hit your head.
A lot of places when I felt sick, they were like, you can't sit down because they don't believe you.
I'll never forget that moment, obviously, because I missed graduation, but they just made me feel not like, oh yeah, you're just another patient in the hospital. I think my most impressive fallback break was one morning I was getting ready for a day at high school, and next thing I know, I'm laying on the floor, my hair's wet, and I'm looking up, and there's 2 paramedics and my mom, and they were like, you need to go to the hospital, you just had a seizure. And I broke a porcelain toilet in half, and my mom says I got a concussion. I still don't believe her to this day, but I also got 2 staples. But I think my biggest struggles with epilepsy is that stress is my biggest trigger. So it's like hard to just be a human. And not only that, but I've just had so many times where people are like, oh yeah, that's seizure girl. Or are the flashing lights going to bother you? And I'm like, no, they just give me a headache.
Yeah, flashing lights. It seems like that's all people know. I mean, that's a good thing, right? But you see movie warnings when you're at the movie theater, warning, trigger warning, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, well, okay, but there's a million different things. Skylar, how common is your version of epilepsy?
I honestly don't have a clue,
Okay.
But going off on people commenting, I had to also quit Hannaford's. My managers thought I was faking it. They thought I was using it as an excuse to get out of work. My mom brought a doctor's note in, and she said, don't make my daughter push carts at night, especially because no one's going to find her. She's going to crack her head open. And they would just be nasty towards me. I
Yeah.
remember one time I got pulled aside, and I used to work up front at the registers, and the manager, she was like, I have a question. I'm like, what the hell are you pulling me aside for? And she goes, so do these lights like bother you? And they're just like the normal
grocery store lights
in a grocery store. And I was like, no. She goes, well, you don't have to be rude. I was just asking a question. I'm like, okay, well, it's kind of offensive to me because you're assuming A, B, and C, and you guys are already thinking of faking it. And speaking of also people not being educated on epilepsy, I went to the ER. I was getting really bad vertigo from one of my meds I was on, which was Depakote. And I was like, can you please draw my blood so Dartmouth can get my levels and see what's going on? Obviously, I was there forever, but when I got my vitals checked, the male RN was sitting there and he was looking up, what is epilepsy? And I was like, I don't want to be here anymore. How the hell are you going to work in a hospital and not know? Because epilepsy, honestly, is a common neurological
term.
condition.
Yeah, like I said, it's the fourth most common neurological disorder, and people don't know enough about it.
Yeah, he literally had to look up what is epilepsy, not even like what is myoclonic epilepsy. It was what is epilepsy. It was so scary to me.
Talk about feeling unsafe. Jeez.
Yeah. So honestly, to sum it all up, it's just hard to live your life. It's just difficult. Like I cry about it a good amount of times because I'm like, I just want to live a normal life like a young adult should. I want to have fun. I want to go stay up, pull an all-nighter, have fun. I've lost a friend once because he was like, oh, well, you can't pull an all-nighter, so go home. And I'm like, go fuck yourself. I'm like, I have epilepsy and you know this.
Yes, yeah.
So it's just so difficult.
What pisses me off the most, honestly, is the people not like believing you. Like you said, you've broken stuff. I've had jobs, like I said, they don't let you sit down. I broke a register with my head at my old job, and I got a concussion and fractured my jaw, and now I can click my jaw.
This infuriates me. And of course, my triggers and where this sends me has nothing to do with epilepsy, but everything to do with the treatment of young people. And quite honestly, in the medical profession, the treatment of women, but obviously also in the workplace where it's too easy to umbrella us under mental illness or stress or drama queen or, oh, she must be ragging it today. All the things people say to justify behaviors that can be classic symptoms of something much, much bigger. So both of you, along with the social implications, losing friends, not being believed, perhaps being bullied or made fun of, that's socially. Then you have your jobs. You're both young people. You want to live your life. You want to branch out. You want to try new things. And all of that is dictated around managing an unpredictable, invisible condition. And so you lose jobs because people either don't have the ability to deal with it or don't believe you or don't give a shit. I mean, all of those things are your reality. For both of you, what is it like? What's the medical side of it been like, finding medications that work?
So I started on Keppra, and let me just say this, that gave me the worst mood swings. I'll say I was probably the rudest person in high school. I was rude to teachers. I was rude to, sometimes if people annoyed me, I would just get up and walk out of class. And one thing I regret is not trying in high school. It just completely ruined my mood. Like for my SATs, I just wrote down smiley faces for all my answers and took a nap because I just did not care about anything. And finally I switched to Lamictal. Like Skylar said, she also has severe depression. The Lamictal actually really helps with depression as well. And I take Topamax as well. Yeah.
Yep, that's another one I took.
So I really only took 2 medications. I mostly switched from Keppra just because it made me literally the worst person in the world.
Well, and there you go. Medicines have side effects, right? So if a side effect of your medicine was, your ankles swell, nobody's going to be a jerk to you because your ankles swell, right? They might call you a cankle lady or something, but I mean, we don't judge people for these physical side effects. Your side effect was behavioral. And so people automatically add a judgment to it. Oh my God, what a bitch. Well, I'm sorry. I'm taking a really strong drug that interferes with my brain to help one thing, and then it causes this to happen. Like, I think that's getting it from both sides. Like, you fix one thing and it causes another, and both of those things interfere with your life and cause incredible stress and trauma.
The chemicals in my brain got all fucked up from having so many seizures that I now have many more medical neurological disorders.
Yes, yes.
A lot of people are like, that comes from childhood trauma. What are you talking about? And I'm like, I'll tell you this, like, my brain is fucked up and I can't help it. Like,
so the other thing too, the changes in the brain from childhood trauma are specific changes. Your changes are exactly the same and you haven't had trauma. Then rather than be criticized or told you're wrong, why not say, dang, let's take a look at this. We have these brain changes that we've often attributed to being born that way or some traumatic event. Skylar, tell me about your medical journey, like how it's been.
Yeah, so it's end of like May, it's gonna hit 4 years of having epilepsy. This shit sucks. People think it's fucked up, but I usually make jokes and I'm like, no, that's how I cope. My journey, obviously, I said this earlier, I also started on Keppra. All I gotta say is I fucking hate Keppra. It sucks. And my first neurologist, she was like cuckoo, and she was giving me so much Keppra that my tiny 17-year-old body could have overdosed. And that's not right. And, my mom and I, we used to have some telehealth appointments, and my mom and I would be like, well, this isn't working. And she would just be like, okay, I'm going to bump up the dosage. Why is that your only solution? So we switched. Awesome pediatric neurologist. His name is Raymond Ferry. Awesome. I recommend if anyone who is obviously in pediatrics still to get him. He is up in Lebanon. So he said, all right, Keppra, let's tone it down a bit. So that's when he first started introducing me to Lamictal. Just a 25 milligram tablet, and I would take it with the Keppra. So it was starting to go good. Obviously, I was still pretty high on seizures. Like, it was not that good, but it was better because I would just have a seizure almost every day on Keppra, and it made me a really bipolar person. So that did not help at all. I was on 3 medications at once: Keppra, Depakote, Lamictal. But now I'm just in my safe space where I'm like, I am loving Lamictal. 200 milligrams, perfect, works. Half and half, obviously, because we're still on that journey to find that medication that works for me. So now I'm gonna try Topamax. Hopefully I don't get fucked up from that, but it just makes me so sad after a seizure. Like, the minute I wake up from a seizure, I am sobbing because not only am I confused, but I'm just sad because I'm like, I just want this to be over. Like, I just want to have somewhat of a normal life, even though I won't, because it'll never go away. And it obviously affects me a lot because, like, what if I want to have kids? Then I have to worry about possible children having epilepsy.
people with epilepsy also being pregnant, that can cause more seizures too because of the blood pressure.
Right.
And the hormone changes and all that.
I used to get more seizures when I was on my period.
And it's just crazy because it's like when my pediatric neurologist, he was telling me, he goes, well, when you decide to have kids, he was just explaining it, and it's just like this long process. But then with normal people who don't have epilepsy can just be like, all right, I want to have a baby, blah, 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 blah. And obviously planning is hard because, it's pregnancy.
Right.
But it's like, I can't just say, okay, I want to plan on having a baby.
No.
Let's conceive, like, let's do this thing. I have to go to my doctor. I have to talk to my doctor. I have to go on vitamins and possibly even medication. And it's a long process, especially because epilepsy meds can affect the baby.
As can seizures, right? So what the fuck? You're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't.
It fucking sucks. And it's like the baby can have seizures, the baby could die, and you have to miscarry. And it's like, it just makes me sad because it's like, I will never have a normal life. And epilepsy, you could have a shorter lifespan because of epilepsy.
People with epilepsy usually live 10 years less than the average person.
Another connection between the three of us is, so I have this condition called trigeminal neuralgia. The nerve condition in the face, the trigeminal nerve is right here. What happens is the nerve gets stimulated and it never shuts up, keeps talking. So toothache, 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 even though there's no toothache. So I spent like 3 years being told, oh, you just want pain meds. You don't have a toothache. Your mouth looks fine. And I had a knife in my face. So I finally went to a neurologist who diagnosed me with the trigeminal neuralgia. Topramate, Tegretol, and Topramax, 3 different anti-seizure meds. I took all 3 of them at the same time. When I was going down the process of having Jack and going off the 9,000 anti-psych meds I was on in the fall of 2018, I was going off all the anti-seizure meds and my face pain was ridiculous. So the only reason I had an MRI was to see if I could get my mouth fixed. And that led me to my brain tumor. That's how I found out the brain tumor. I had a long conversation with the doctor about, can I take the anti-seizure meds pregnant? And Skylar, this is what gets me thinking of you. Well, both of you actually, is we went down the lists of all the side effects of certain seizure meds and all the side effects of seizures when you're pregnant, and ultimately decided that at my age, if I were going to follow the process of having a baby, I couldn't be on seizure med. So I had to fix my mouth. I had a mouth I could fix. What a horrifying sentence that is for a mother who wants to have children and has to make a choice between seizures while pregnant, medicine while pregnant, with, that's just another thing. At your age, you should be worried about not getting pregnant, right?
Well, here's the thing too, like people bullying us, making fun of it. Anyone can have a seizure. Like Skylar said, stress is her biggest trigger. Some people, if they get wicked stressed, if they have like a panic attack, they could have a seizure. Yeah. If it gets really sunny out and they pass out from the sun, they could have a seizure. Anyone can have a seizure.
Yeah.
Jane is like, well, I can tell when it's coming on. Hell no, I'm a ticking time bomb. So I do have one. I actually had one last week at my job. That night I was stressed because a service manager, she got pissed off at me because I wanted to eat one of the rolls. And I was like, I have to eat, like, or else I'll have a seizure. Like, I have to eat. And I was working a double that day. And she was like, well, I'm going to have to report you. And so she reported me. And then next thing I know, I'm on the floor. I look up, here's my boss. And then I look up, there's another boss. And then there's my friend standing there calling 911.
So what happened to you work-wise? Did the complaint get taken away? Like,
I was like, you see what I told you? I'm like, I told you I needed to eat. And I wasn't lying about the fact I needed to eat because I have epilepsy. Now look what happened. She just stood there in shock that I even said that. And she thought since I am not mentally fully there, she thought I was just gonna fucking say nothing. And it's like,
one of my jobs fired me for having epilepsy.
So Jane, you've actually had to not drive. Like you've had your license taken away. Is that by your doctor or by the DMV, or is it just sort of a procedural thing?
By my doctor, I could not drive until I was 18. I was not allowed to get my license until I was 18 because of all the seizures I was having. Actually, just last week, I was not allowed to drive because of everything going on. I am allowed to drive again. But it's just for safety of myself and others because I don't know. Well, couple of weeks ago, actually, I felt the heartburn coming on. So I pulled over and I just woke up in a ditch.
You both appear to have very supportive families. In general, would you say that's true?
Oh, absolutely. My mom is like my best friend.
Yeah, 1000%. My mom, she always is on top of like, you need to go schedule appointment. She still goes to my neurology appointments, which awesome. And my stepdad, he's a flight paramedic. He is very, very good with taking care of me when I have a seizure. Even my grandparents that I don't see often are really good about it.
Yeah.
And I appreciate it because it's like, I'm not with you guys all the time, but thank you. Like,
Yeah,
I
right.
appreciate it.
Well, and it must also really predicate for both of you who you choose to be your friends and who you keep as your friends, because there cannot be any room in your lives to put up with crap from people that don't understand or empathize. It feels shitty to get treated badly for something you have no control over. It's like, what the fuck? Like, how is this okay? So that's a wonderful thing. Relationships. So boyfriends, girlfriends, significant others. How is that?
Oh gosh. My previous boyfriend, when he didn't believe me, and he would call my best friend and talk shit about me to my best friend and say that I was faking for attention.
Oh, yeah.
You should be able to like take care of you know what I mean? Like, it's disrespectful and it hurts too, because it's like, why would I fake that? Like Skylar said, it costs a ton. You know what I mean?
Skylar, how about you, relationship wise?
I mean, I had a good amount of high school relationships. They didn't really care. They didn't really talk about it. They just kind of didn't give a fuck.
Right.
But now, my current boyfriend, Gavin, he didn't experience any of my seizures up until like this past month. But he was really good about it. And I always tell him, I'm like, I just feel bad because I'm not a normal person. I feel like I cause a burden on your life because I feel like I'm just a liability to you. So he always says, no, 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 no. Like, I still see you as a person. And he was like, it's not your fault that you got diagnosed with that. It's not like you could do anything about it.
Final question. If there was one thing that you wish people understood better, or if there was one thing that you would want people to know, what would that be?
The thing I would want people to know is it's way more common than people think, and it's not all just convulsion. And most of the time when we say leave me alone, it means to really leave me alone. You know what I mean?
Yes.
We need time for ourselves to just come down, because we're stressed out most of the time. And we're not trying to be bitches, like Skylar said, I'm very lucky that I can tell when men are coming on, you know what I mean? But I really think people should do more research, because it's the fourth most common type of neurological disorder, which I didn't even know until I did more research into it. And there's so many different types of epilepsy.
Right.
Things I would want people to know is that it's not about the flashing lights. It's not that. It can happen at any moment, anytime, any place. I just feel like, in my mind, people aren't educated enough on epilepsy. I feel like no one knows really what epilepsy is. And it's common, like 200,000 a year.
Right. It's
And
not even rare. Right.
And I just feel like, take it more seriously. But also, my biggest thing, just treat me like a normal person, not a liability. I have just been treated only like a liability.
Like, oh no, here she comes. Right.
Yeah. Someone just has epilepsy, and then I get bombarded with questions. I mean, that doesn't really matter to me, but it's like, I don't like feeling just like, oh, it's the girl with epilepsy, seizure girl. Educate yourself. I'm willing to help people be educated on my condition. So I think that's what I would tell people.
I hate when people
epilepsy.
call epilepsy a disease, or they say, oh, I had a fit. I'm like, that sounds
it's not
like
the same thing.
Right.
That sounds like I'm a 3-year-old. That sounds like I'm Jack.
Oh, I have one of those. So, well, girls, I have to tell you, Really appreciate the fact that you guys were willing to come on here, share your stories. Skylar, do you still do your podcast?
Yes, my podcast is Get Ready to Crumble. I have my Instagram page on there, and in my Facebook bio, I have a link.
So listen, again, I just want to thank you for putting yourselves out there. The way that we teach people is to tell people, and people might not want to hear it, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't say our words. All right, everybody. So remember, always be good to yourself first. After you're good to yourself, be good to someone else. And as always, have a good day, everybody. Hey, thanks for listening and supporting the podcast. Feel free to leave a review and share my stories with your friends. Please reach out with your own stories, as I love connecting with my listeners. If you would like to get to know Molly, head over to mollybfoundation.org to see what she is all about. If you want to see what I'm up to next, you can find me on Instagram at barb_444. On Facebook as Barb Higgins, and at my website, 1000tinysteps.com. And while you're there, sign up for my newsletter, a weekly way to find out what's up in the life of Barb Higgins.